In fall 2016, I moved into half of a very old house. It was built in the 1880s, close to the original campus of Indiana University. The area around the old campus had been converted into a park, but it was filled with homeless people and drug users. The owners had turned the house into an odd duplex. My friend who lived there before me claimed it was haunted, but I didn't believe him since he was kind of strange. The layout was unusual. Entering the front door put you in a living room-like area, and if you kept walking, you'd reach a doorway to the bedroom, and past that was the kitchen. There were no doors except one to the bathroom and one leading to a shared basement. My first night there was uneventful, though I felt uneasy because I hadn't lived alone in a long time. I felt lonely and anxious, stayed up late, and eventually fell asleep. But I woke up around 3 a.m. It sounds cliche, I know. What woke me was a sound of drumming, as if multiple people were pounding on every flat surface in the living room. It lasted several minutes, and I was terrified. Finally, after about 2 or 3 minutes, I gathered the courage to check. As soon as I stepped into the living room, it stopped. Nothing else happened that night, but I barely slept. A few days later, a friend came to visit. As he was about to leave, we stood by the front door near my bookshelf. I told him about my trouble sleeping and described my experience on the first night. Just as I said that, a book flew off the shelf and landed about 3 feet away, between us. It had to travel past a dresser that was next to the shelf. My friend gave me a disturbed look, said he had to leave, and I couldn't blame him. Eventually, I talked to the guy who lived in the other half of the duplex. He'd been there for 8 years. He told me no one stayed longer than a year, and everyone described the same strange events. Oddly enough, he said nothing ever happened on his side. It made no sense, but that's how it was. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but strange things kept happening. Each night I heard unusual noises. Sometimes they sounded like whispers coming from inside the walls. Other times, footsteps pacing in the hallway outside my bedroom. I began feeling like someone was watching me constantly. Whenever I was alone, I couldn't shake the sense that something was lurking just beyond sight, hiding in the shadows. One night as I prepared for bed, loud banging erupted from the basement, like someone hitting the walls with a heavy hammer. I hesitated, but then mustered my courage to check. Descending the creaky stairs, the banging grew louder, faster, and more intense. My heart raced as I reached the bottom and stepped into the dim basement. But to my surprise, the room was empty, except for some old furniture and boxes covered in dusty sheets. The banging stopped as abruptly as it had begun. I couldn't shake the feeling something was deeply wrong with that house. It felt like a sinister presence was hiding in every corner, waiting to strike. I tried ignoring it, carrying on with my daily routine, but the oppressive feeling of dread became impossible to ignore. One evening while cooking dinner, I heard a chilling scream come from the bedroom. Terrified, I dropped what I was doing and rushed to check. When I arrived, the room was empty, silent except for the pounding of my own heartbeat. I was beginning to feel like I was losing my sanity. The strange events became more frequent, and I felt as though something beyond my understanding was tormenting me. I knew I had to escape, but I couldn't afford to move out. I felt trapped, like a prisoner in my own home. Then one night, things took a terrible turn. I woke from restless sleep, hearing whispers from the walls. It sounded like hundreds of voices speaking simultaneously, their words impossible to understand, but filled with anger and hate. A chill ran down my spine as I sat up in bed, my heart racing. Suddenly, the whispers ceased, replaced by a low, sinister growl coming from the foot of my bed. I switched on the bedside lamp, expecting to see an animal in the dark, but what I saw was far worse. Standing at the foot of my bed was a shadowy figure, its eyes glowing unnaturally, mouth twisted into an evil grin, showing sharp, jagged teeth. I wanted to scream, run, or do something, but I was frozen in place, unable to move or even breathe. Then, without warning, the figure lunged toward me, clawed hands reaching to grab me. I shut my eyes, bracing for the worst, but nothing happened. When I opened them again, the figure had vanished, leaving me alone in darkness. That was when I knew I had to get out of that house no matter the cost. I quickly packed my bags and fled into the night, leaving behind the nightmares that plagued me there. To this day, I still don't know what lurked in the shadows of that old house, and I pray I never find out. But one thing is certain, I will never forget the horror I experienced, and I will never set foot in that house again. Before we get into the next story, if you're new here, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to receive upcoming scary stories. We greatly appreciate your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. When I was working as a solo truck driver, I had a delivery in Memphis, Tennessee. It was a hot summer evening and the sun was setting, bathing the city streets in golden light. I'd been driving for hours and my GPS directed me to a warehouse on the edge of town. Pulling into the parking lot, I immediately felt uneasy. The building seemed abandoned, with only the creaking of old wooden crates breaking the silence. I grabbed my clipboard, stepped out of the truck, and felt the warm air around me. A rough-looking man with a thick beard met me at the loading dock. He signed for the delivery, and I started unloading. However, hours passed and he kept delaying me, claiming issues with paperwork. By 7 o'clock, my driving time was up, and I needed a place to rest for my mandatory 10-hour break. He suggested I go to the nearby TA truck stop in West Memphis, just across the state line. Frustrated and tired, I thanked him and climbed back into my rig. The drive to the truck stop was uneventful, but when I arrived, it felt strangely quiet. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the lot. I parked in the back, where darkness seemed to completely swallow my truck. My dog, Noodles, a scruffy terrier, whimpered nervously. I took Noodles for a quick walk through the empty lot and saw a man standing near a trailer, staring blankly ahead. His presence unnerved me, so I hurried Noodles back to the truck. After settling Noodles inside, I grabbed my dinner bag and headed toward the restaurant at the truck stop. As I walked, footsteps echoed behind me. Turning around, I noticed it was the same man I'd seen earlier, following me at a distance. My heart raced, and I quickened my pace, weaving between parked trucks. Yet no matter which turns I took, he stayed close behind me, just out of sight. I hurried inside the restaurant, relieved by its warm and lively atmosphere. The place was crowded, and I took a seat at the bar, ordering a burger and fries. As I waited for my food, I glanced around, searching for the strange man, but he was nowhere in sight. Halfway through my meal, I went to use the restroom. Upon returning, I noticed my fork was now placed on the right side of my plate. I'm left-handed, so I always place utensils on the left. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had touched my food. I called the waitress over, still standing behind my chair, and asked if she'd touched my meal. She said no, and I asked if she'd seen anyone near my plate. She shook her head, too busy to have noticed. I asked to speak to the manager. When he arrived, I explained about the strange man and my disturbed food. The manager took my concerns seriously, offering to replace my meal and move me to a safer seat. While waiting for my new food, he checked security footage. Returning with a serious expression, he told me he'd reviewed the video and confirmed a man had approached my table while I was in the restroom, and he'd put something into my mashed potatoes. The man had stirred it and then left the building. My skin crawled as the manager offered to call the police. I agreed, feeling relief wash over me as I finished my new meal. The manager sat across from me, carefully scanning the restaurant. "I don't want you leaving alone," he said. "The police will escort you back to your truck." Soon 2 officers arrived, took statements, and checked the area. They found no sign of the mysterious man, but promised to monitor the truck stop. One officer offered to walk me back to my rig. As we crossed the dark parking lot, I felt extremely grateful for these helpful strangers. When we reached my truck, the officer assured me his partner would patrol the lot all night for my safety. I thanked them sincerely, finally feeling at ease. The night had been frightening and exhausting, but thanks to their kindness, I remained unharmed. As I settled in for the night, with noodles curled up next to me, I still couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious man was out there somewhere, watching and waiting. Yet knowing the police were nearby brought comfort, and eventually my eyes grew heavy and I drifted off. When I was about 13, I spent the night at my cousin's house. It was a cozy little place out in the countryside, surrounded by thick trees and darkness. My cousin and I were alone for the night, as his parents had gone out of town. We were excited to stay awake late, playing video games until morning. As the night grew later, we sat close together in his room, the TV screen casting eerie shadows on the walls. The only sounds were our controllers clicking and the occasional creak as the old house settled. I was deeply absorbed in the game, sitting on the edge of the bed, when my cousin suddenly got up to use the bathroom. I barely noticed he was gone, focused completely on the game. Then abruptly I felt something behind me, a presence that shouldn't have been there. Without thinking, I turned around to speak to my cousin, but he wasn't there. Confused, I glanced around the empty room. That's when I noticed something strange, the faint outline on the bed where someone had clearly been sitting just moments earlier. A sinking feeling filled my stomach as I realized I was not alone. I called my cousin's name, but there was no reply. Fear began creeping in as I wondered if something sinister was lurking nearby. I was hesitant to check under the bed or open the closet, afraid of what I might see. Instead, I told myself to stay calm, convincing myself it was just my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Hours went by, and my cousin still hadn't come back from the bathroom. Anxiety gripped me as I debated leaving the safety of the room to look for him. Eventually, worry got the better of me, and I cautiously stepped out into the dim hallway. The house felt different at night, darker, stranger, more frightening. Shadows danced along the walls, and every creak of the floor sent chills down my spine. I called for my cousin again, but heard only silence. I approached the bathroom door, my heart beating loudly. Hesitating briefly, I knocked softly and whispered, "Cousin?" No response came, and a dreadful feeling swept over me. With shaky hands, I slowly opened the door, preparing myself for the worst. To my shock, the bathroom was empty. There was no sign of my cousin at all. Panic surged through me as I realized he had vanished without a trace. Frantically, I searched through the house, calling his name repeatedly into the darkness. Still, no reply. Minutes turned to hours, and my mind raced with terrifying possibilities. What if something awful had happened to him? What if something else, something dark and evil, was in the house with us? Fear overwhelmed me, nearly reducing me to tears. Then suddenly I heard it, a faint whisper drifting through the darkness, saying, "Help me." The voice was quiet, barely audible above the pounding of my heart, yet it filled me with dread, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I followed the sound carefully, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. It led me down into the basement, a place I had always found creepy, even during the day. Descending the stairs, the air grew colder, and an eerie feeling settled over me like a thick fog. I paused at the bottom step, straining to hear any sign of life. Then I heard someone softly crying, coming from the far, shadowy corner of the basement. Slowly I approached, my footsteps echoing off the cold concrete floor. Finally I saw him, my cousin huddled in the corner, face wet with tears. Relief flooded me as I rushed to his side, wrapping my arms tightly around him. "What happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up, eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "I don't know." I was in the bathroom when something grabbed me. Something cold, something not human. A chill raced down my spine at his words. Whatever had taken him was beyond my understanding, something dark and terrifying. Together, we quickly went back upstairs, our hearts still pounding. We locked ourselves inside his bedroom, too afraid to venture back into the unknown darkness. As the night slowly passed, we stayed close, holding each other for comfort. We knew whatever happened that night had changed us forever. It was a dark, chilly evening, and I was driving alone on an empty road. My job as a delivery driver often took me through remote areas, but I'd never felt nervous before. Cruising along the deserted highway, I suddenly saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head and saw a woman sitting in the passenger seat of a car next to mine. Her hair was pulled back tightly in a bun, exactly like Miss Trunchbull from that movie. But what truly caught my attention was the look of absolute terror on her face. She stared directly at me, eyes wide, like she'd just seen a ghost. Before I could react, the car suddenly took the next exit, leaving me puzzled. I shook off the eerie feeling that crawled up my spine, but the incident stuck with me. About half an hour later, another car appeared beside me. The driver was different, but incredibly, the same terrified woman was in the passenger seat. Her hair remained pulled back, her expression frozen in fear. Seeing her again was deeply unsettling, and I sensed something was terribly wrong. I decided to stop at the next rest area to notify the authorities, but before I could, the car disappeared into the darkness. Feeling helpless, I continued driving cautiously, my nerves on edge. Hours passed, and I was nearing London when the same car appeared yet again. The same woman, the same frightened look, but this time she seemed to be silently screaming, desperately mouthing words at me. A chill raced down my spine. Without hesitation, I pulled into a nearby rest stop and called emergency services. I nervously recounted my strange encounters to the dispatcher, who reassured me that other drivers had reported similar sightings. While waiting for the authorities, I couldn't shake the heavy feeling of dread. Who was this woman? Why was she terrified? Minutes felt like hours as I waited alone in darkness, hearing only distant traffic. Finally, the police arrived, and I quickly shared every detail. Despite searching thoroughly, they found no trace of the mysterious woman or the car. I drove home that night feeling deeply unsettled, haunted by her frightened face. I couldn't shake the idea that I'd witnessed something beyond understanding. In the days that followed, I checked news reports for any mention of the incidents, but found nothing. It was as if none of it had ever occurred, like I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something sinister had been on that lonely road, something that defied logic. Though I tried convincing myself otherwise, I remained convinced I'd encountered the supernatural. From then on, I avoided driving alone on deserted roads, always watching carefully for signs of the terrified woman. No matter how far I drove, her haunting face stayed etched in my memory, a chilling reminder of the night I faced something beyond comprehension. Looking back, I couldn't help but wonder, had it all been mere coincidence, or had I glimpsed something unknown, something hidden and unexplained? I was home alone for the week, as my family had gone on vacation while I had to stay behind for work. It was around 2 a.m., and I'd stayed up late to watch a scary movie alone in the dark basement. I was determined to really frighten myself. I was trying to push myself, seeing how far into fear I could go, while still feeling safe in my own home. That's when I suddenly heard heavy footsteps upstairs. Normally, when my family was home, I'd hear them walking through the front hallway past the basement door, so it wasn't strange. But this time, it was terrifying. The fear hit me instantly. I quickly turned off the TV. The basement door was up a flight of stairs and around the corner, so whoever was up there couldn't have seen the light from the screen. I then heard the basement doorknob click and turn. Sitting in the darkness, I moved very slowly, trying not to make a sound, and crawled behind our large TV. As I crept past the screen, I panicked when I saw it still glowed faintly. Then I heard the soft creaks of footsteps coming down the carpeted stairs. I froze behind the TV, not even daring to breathe. Minutes passed. I heard nothing else. Had the intruder seen the screen glow? Had it gone dark just in time? Was someone now standing silently in the dark, listening for any sound I made? I stayed frozen in place for what felt like forever. My panic started to ease, and I began thinking more clearly. Was someone really there? Could anyone stand still and silent that long without a single sound? The basement was so quiet that the silence itself hurt my ears. If someone had come down, they'd still be in the basement, because the stairs creaked too much for someone to sneak back up. Also, the doorknob had turned, and there was no way to avoid making sounds on the first floor. I began counting in my head to pass time. Drool slipped from my mouth to the carpet, but I didn't dare swallow because of the sound. I counted to 60 over and over again, 30, 60 times by now. My fear had turned to confusion. I guessed I had been crouched in total darkness for nearly 2 hours and still hadn't heard anything else. If someone had come in, none of it made any sense. Finally, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stay there until the sun came up and lit the small basement windows. Worse, I started to notice a terrible smell, strong and sickly sweet. I moved slowly along the wall, heading for the stairs. If someone was standing in the dark, maybe I could sneak past them and dash up the steps. As I inched forward, the smell grew worse. Maybe something had died down there. No living person could smell like that. Scary images filled my mind, of some rotting thing standing quietly, waiting for me. I moved as fast as I could without making a sound. Just as I got close to the stairs, there was a huge crash, like something heavy falling. I leaped forward and ran as fast as I could up the stairs. I bolted through the open basement door and out my wide open front door. Now completely sure that someone had broken in, I called the police from my phone and waited outside, watching the house from a safe distance. The police arrived, searched the house, and came back out with serious expressions. They asked me some questions and told me they found a body inside. It was my elderly neighbor. They said he likely had a heart attack and wandered into my house looking for help. They believed I had left my front door unlocked, and he came in while dying. At first, I felt horrible. The thought that I sat in the dark, hiding, while an old man died just a few feet away crushed me. But then something else hit me. What was that loud noise that made me run? I asked the officers, and they said the back door was also open. They found a single muddy footprint near it. That meant someone else had been inside the basement with us. Someone who had stood silently in the dark, not making a sound, right next to a dead man. I was a new nurse at an old hospital and had only been there a couple of months. The place had creaky floors and dim halls, which always made me uneasy. But I wanted to prove I was a strong and capable nurse, even with the eerie atmosphere. One night, I was assigned to take care of Mr. Thompson, an older man with pneumonia. When I walked into his room, I saw him staring at a corner, eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Thompson, are you okay?" I asked, trying not to show I was scared too. He turned to me and said with a shaking voice, "There's a girl standing in the corner. She's been watching me for hours." I looked where he was pointing, but saw nothing, just shadows from the flickering light. "There's no one there," I told him. "You're probably imagining things." But he shook his head. "No, she's real. She's been haunting me since I got here." I tried to calm him, but I could feel his fear. All night he kept looking at that corner and muttering about the girl. A strange feeling came over me. I couldn't shake the sense that we weren't alone in the room. Now and then, I thought I saw movement from the corner of my eye. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. At midnight, I went to check on Mr. Thompson again. But this time, when I entered the room, he was gone. My heart started racing. I searched the room but couldn't find him. Just then, a cold breeze moved through the room, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. I looked at the corner and saw her, the ghostly girl. She was pale, almost see-through, with empty, dark eyes. She stared at me with such intensity it sent chills through my body. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but something kept me still. A mix of fear and duty made me ask, "What do you want?" My voice barely came out. The girl tilted her head, then spoke in a deep, eerie voice. "I am trapped here, cursed to walk these halls forever. But you can help me." Her words froze my blood. "How can I help?" I asked. She reached out her ghostly hand. "Find the locket. It holds the key to my freedom. Set me free." I didn't know if I should trust her, but something in her sad eyes made me want to help. "Where is it?" I asked. She pointed to the hospital's old abandoned wing, a place said to be haunted by restless spirits. Then she vanished into the air, leaving me alone. Still shaking, I made my way into the abandoned wing. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled like decay. As I walked toward the attic, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows moved along the walls like they were whispering secrets. In the attic, I began searching. It was full of old boxes, medical tools, and yellowed papers. But then I saw it, a small, tarnished locket buried in a pile of debris. My hands shook as I picked it up. It felt heavy, like it held more than just memories. I knew opening it might unleash something I couldn't understand, but I also knew it was the only way to keep my promise. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a faded photo of a young girl, her face full of innocence. Just then, a piercing scream echoed through the attic, making me jump back. I looked up, and there she was again, flickering like a candle flame. "You've done it," she whispered. "You've set me free." A bright light surrounded her, lighting up the attic in a strange glow. Then she disappeared in a puff of mist. I stood alone, shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. But even through the fear, I felt a strange peace. I had helped a lost soul find her way, and in doing so, found strength in myself I didn't know was there. My parents got divorced in 1997. I was born in 1990, so I was 7 when it happened. They stayed friendly, and my mom moved into my grandparents' old house. My grandparents had money and had just moved out, so they let my mom and us move in without selling the place. We lived there for 5 years. It was me, my mom, my 2 older sisters, and our dog. The house had 3 floors: basement, ground floor, and upper floor where we slept. The basement was the scariest part of the house. The staircase ran from the basement to the top floor in a spiral, and most of the steps creaked loudly when stepped on. Several times a week, we'd hear slow footsteps coming up the stairs from the basement. They'd stop briefly at the ground floor and then continue to the top floor. Often they would stop outside my oldest sister's room, but sometimes they'd stop outside mine or my middle sister's door. All of us heard them. My mom didn't like to talk about it, but my sisters and I would always talk about it the next day to confirm what we heard. We all hated going into the basement. It was big, exactly the kind of space kids should love to play in, but we couldn't stand it. Even our dog avoided it. She hated that basement as much as we did. A lot of small, strange things happened down there. The light in the basement would randomly turn off. Things would move by themselves, and we'd often hear noises like stuff shifting or being dragged, even though no one was down there. One evening, my sisters and I were using walkie-talkies, trying to tune into the local police channel. But this time, the voice we heard was different. It sounded much closer. The voice started saying strange things. It was talking directly to my oldest sister, saying it was going to hurt her. It even said her name, but I don't remember it answering any of our questions. We got really scared and quickly turned the walkie-talkie off. Just a minute later, our dog ran into the room, barking into nothing. She was a big dog, protective, and had never done that before or after. She stayed in the room barking for a long time like she was guarding us. Another time, it was just me and my mom at home while my sisters and the dog were out. I was playing in my room upstairs and my mom was somewhere else in the house doing her own thing. Suddenly, I heard loud footsteps coming from the basement, so loud I could hear them from the second floor. The steps ran all the way up from the basement, through the house, and then stopped right outside my bedroom door. I froze. The steps were heavy and angry, nothing like how my mom walks. Then my bedroom door slammed shut with a loud bang. I screamed and cried. My mom rushed up the stairs trying to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it was locked, though the door didn't even have a lock. My mom yelled at me to stay calm and ran downstairs to get tools to break the door open. I was 7 or 8 years old at the time and terrified. While she was gone, the door suddenly unlocked itself and slowly opened. Another time, my sisters and the dog were out again, and there was a storm. For some reason, I was terrified of the thunder that night, even though I've never been scared of thunder before or since. But that night, I was. Then things in the basement went wild. We heard stuff being thrown around down there and glass shattering. In the morning, we went down to see, and sure enough, there were broken glass and items all over the place. We also heard footsteps racing up and down the stairs. My mom and I just sat in the living room, holding each other, too scared to move. The front door suddenly swung open, then slammed shut. It kept opening and closing for several minutes. It was stormy, and the wind was strong, but the way it happened didn't feel like the wind at all. A lot of little things happen like that, but those are the ones that stick with me most. It always seemed worse when our dog wasn't around, and even more so after my older sister moved out. Last night, I couldn't sleep at all, which isn't unusual for me since I work night shifts and have become a total night owl. So even on my nights off, I'm usually awake all night. I was lying in bed watching a romantic comedy, laughing and feeling great. I decided to treat myself to a drink. My home bar is in the basement. It's fully finished and set up like a man cave. I've spent plenty of nights down there alone or with friends, and nothing weird ever happened before, so I wasn't even thinking of anything scary. I finished my movie and headed downstairs. I went behind the bar, poured a drink, and started heading back up. But as I was on the second to last step, I heard a voice say, "Hey!" It came from somewhere in the middle of the basement. It sounded like a man in his 50s. I knew I was alone in the house, and the sound freaked me out. I looked down, but nothing moved. No one answered or showed themselves. I panicked and quickly climbed the last 2 steps, slamming the basement door shut. I stood there trying to figure out what just happened. Was I imagining things? Could someone have broken in? Then I heard the man's voice again through the door, but it was muffled this time. It sounded like he asked, "Where are you going?" and then kept talking. I couldn't understand everything he said because I was in full panic mode, heart racing. I told myself this was serious. Maybe someone was in my house. I ran into the next room, grabbed my flashlight and my baseball bat, and carefully went back down. But this time, everything was silent, no noise at all. I slowly turned on every light, checked every corner, and walked through every room in the basement. It was empty, just me. The next afternoon after I woke up, I went down again with the bat and checked everything all over. Still nothing. No signs of anyone. No way someone could have gotten in or out without me knowing. I started to question whether I was going crazy, but I know what I heard. The man's voice was loud and clear, and he was definitely talking to me, even through the closed door. It really felt like he was trying to have a full conversation. I've lived here for 15 years and nothing like this has ever happened. This is a quiet, safe neighborhood. I've never had a break-in or anything strange. Could something like this really just happen out of nowhere? Or am I finally losing it? I don't know, but I've decided I'm going back down tonight at the exact same time, 1:50 a.m., to see if it happens again. I'm too curious not to. I want to know what he was trying to say, If it's an intruder, I'll be ready this time. But either way, I need to know. I stayed down there from 1:45 to 3 a.m., walking around, calling out, searching. Nothing happened. Not a single noise. Part of me thinks whatever it was might need the dark or something unexpected to appear. Maybe just going down there with a plan ruins it. A couple of years ago, I was home alone. My husband was out of state on a work trip, and I was left to take care of the house by myself. It was one of those nights where the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the darkness felt like it was creeping into every corner. I made myself some dinner and went into the kitchen, the smell of spices and cooking food filling the room. To keep myself company, I turned on the news on our Samsung Smart TV, left the remote on the coffee table, and went back to the kitchen. After a few minutes, I noticed the sound of the news had gone quiet. Confused, I dried my hands and walked back into the living room. What I saw made my blood run cold. The TV screen wasn't off. It was showing a video feed of a couch. Not just any couch. Our couch. The one in our living room. I looked around, trying to figure out what was going on. The room was just like I'd left it. The remote was still sitting on the table, untouched. But the TV was clearly showing a live feed of the room. A chill went down my spine as I realized what this meant. Someone was watching us through our TV. My heart started racing, but I stayed calm. I grabbed a roll of duct tape and covered the TV's built-in camera, hoping that would block them. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every little noise made me jump. Every flickering light made me uneasy. I couldn't help but wonder, how long had someone been watching us before I noticed? Then one evening, while getting ready for bed, a news report caught my attention. The headline made my stomach drop. Samsung Smart TVs could be hacked. My heart pounded as the reporter explained how hackers had found ways to access the built-in cameras on some TV models. It felt like a hand of ice squeezed my heart. I stared at our TV in the living room, realizing that it had been the window into our lives, without us ever knowing. How many times had someone watched us while we sat, ate, or relaxed in that room? I couldn't stop thinking about it. From then on, I was always alert. Every shadow looked like something hiding. Every sound made me nervous. I checked the house constantly, looking for any signs that someone had broken in or was still watching. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right anymore. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint scratching sound. I froze, listening. The sound grew louder, more steady, until it felt like it was echoing through the entire house. I panicked, knowing something was out there, or maybe inside. I reached for my phone to call for help, but before I could dial, the scratching stopped. The silence that followed was even scarier. I stayed frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. Then the scratching started again, but this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the living room, from the same TV that had shown our couch. My stomach dropped. I knew now, whatever was scratching wasn't a person, it wasn't a hacker, it was something else. Something dark. Something not human. Something that had been waiting all along, watching us from inside the house, inside the screen. The scratching grew louder, more wild, and I knew it was trying to show itself. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just lay there frozen as I realized we were no longer alone in our home. Whatever it was finally making itself known. And now in the silence of the night, with no one to help, we were at the mercy of whatever had come through that TV screen. It was a scary night. My parents had gone to a dinner party earlier and left me home alone. Usually I didn't mind being by myself, but tonight felt different. Something felt off. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the glowing. The glowing numbers on my alarm clock said it was past midnight. The darkness outside seemed to press into every part of the house. I pulled my blanket tighter around me, trying to stop the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, just barely louder than the wind outside. It said my name, Tom. It sounded like it came from downstairs. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, terrified. Who would be calling my name this late at night? My parents wouldn't be home for hours, and I didn't have any friends nearby. I listened closely, but the house was completely still, except for the old walls creaking every now and then. I sat there thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to stay right there in bed, but another part of me needed to know where that voice came from. In the end, my curiosity took over. I had to find out what it was. My hands shook as I quietly got out of bed. I tiptoed to my door and looked down the dim hallway. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the hallway and slowly made my way down the stairs. Each step felt louder than usual in the quiet house. As I got closer to the bottom, I could feel the air grow colder, and I shivered. When I reached the last step, I heard the voice again, this time louder, closer. Tom, it said again, almost as if it was just around the corner. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. I turned the corner and entered the living room. It was completely dark except for the pale moonlight slipping in through the curtains. I looked around the room, eyes searching the shadows. That's when I saw it, someone standing near the window. The figure was still, and the moonlight behind it made its shape stand out sharply. My heart was pounding. I took a small step forward, my feet barely making a sound. "Who's there?" I whispered. The figure didn't say anything, but I could feel its stare. I reached out and flipped the light switch. In a flash, the room lit up, and I realized I'd been scared by a coat rack. My parents' coats hung there, moving slightly from the breeze. I let out a deep breath, a little embarrassed at myself. But then I heard it again, the voice whispering right behind me. "Tom." The sound sent chills down my whole body. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just empty space and the wind outside. That's when the panic really hit me. I rushed toward the front door, wanting to get out of the house. But just as I reached for the handle, I felt an ice-cold hand grab my shoulder. My body locked up in fear. I spun around, ready to fight, but there was no one, just the long, dark hallway behind me. It stretched on like a nightmare, and I felt myself backing away, tripping over my feet. Then I heard it again, a low growl coming from the dark. It wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. It was deep and angry. I scrambled to my feet, backing away as fast as I could. But then it stopped. Just like that, the house was silent again. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat. I stood there frozen, not knowing what to do next. Then I remembered my phone. I had to call someone. I grabbed it with shaking hands and dialed my parents. When someone picked up, I expected to hear my mom or dad. But instead, I heard that same whispering voice. "Tom," it said. My skin went cold. "You shouldn't have come looking for me, Tom," the voice hissed. "Now you're mine." Then the call ended. I was left in the dark, alone with whatever was hiding in my house. I dropped to my knees crying, realizing the awful truth. I wasn't alone, and whatever was with me, it didn't just want to scare me. I'm 23 years old. My name's Jake. My girlfriend Sarah and I love exploring abandoned places. There's something thrilling about walking through old buildings that have been forgotten. Every step feels like it echoes with old stories. But we weren't ready for what happened the night we explored that haunted hospital. It was a cold evening in the fall when we decided to check it out. The hospital was just outside of town. The moon was low, casting a weird light over the broken building. Ivy covered the walls, and the shattered windows looked like empty eyes. Even though it looked creepy, we couldn't resist. We had to see what was inside. As we got closer to the entrance, I felt uneasy. It was like the building's past was pressing down on us. Still, I pushed those feelings away. I wanted to see more. We pushed open the old metal gate, which groaned loudly. We walked into the courtyard. The smell of rot hung in the air, and everything was quiet, too quiet. We walked through tall weeds, our footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. Inside, the hospital was dark and cold. Hallways stretched out in every direction. We walked slowly, each step sending chills down my spine. Sarah held my hand tightly. Our breathing sounded loud in the stillness. I kept feeling like someone was watching us. Then we heard it, a soft whisper, barely louder than our own breathing. We stopped and listened. The whisper grew louder, bouncing off the walls. Without saying anything, we followed it. The sound led us to an old staircase. We looked at each other and started going down, one step at a time, our flashlights barely lighting the way. At the bottom, we were in a long hallway lined with doors. Each one seemed to be hiding something terrible. With growing fear, we opened the doors one after another, hoping to find the source of the whisper. As we kept going, the whisper got louder. The air felt heavier, like something terrible was waiting for us. Then we realized we weren't alone. We saw shapes in the dark, quickly moving, just at the edge of the light. I felt eyes watching us, cold and angry. The whispers grew louder, their words turning strange and creepy. Panic built up inside me. We tried to find our way back, but every hallway looked the same. The whispers kept following us, getting louder and more desperate. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, we found a door that looked different from all the rest. It was old, scratched up, and looked like no one had opened it in years. As we walked toward it, the whispers got so loud it hurt our ears. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room glowed with a strange blue light. Shadows moved across the walls like they were alive. In the middle stood a figure, its face hidden. Its eyes glowed and it smiled, a twisted, cruel smile. That was the source of the whispers. It was fear and darkness made real. Sarah and I didn't say a word. We just turned and ran, hearts racing. We ran through the halls, the whispers still screaming in our minds. We didn't stop until we made it out of the gates. Out in the cold night air, we could finally breathe. But even though we left the building, I felt like something followed us, like we didn't leave alone, like something would always be with us, in our dreams. A couple of years ago, I was home alone. My parents went out for dinner, and my siblings were away at college. I was excited to have the house to myself for once. I planned to binge watch my favorite show and eat a bunch of snacks, but the house felt too quiet. Every little creak and groan of the wooden floors seemed louder than usual. The wind outside sounded strange, like it was whispering. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the weird feeling wouldn't go away. As the night went on, I kept hearing strange noises, footsteps outside my room, the sound of someone opening cabinets in the kitchen. I tried to tell myself the house was just making noise like it always did, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I decided to check. My heart was pounding as I got up from the couch and walked to the kitchen. Everything looked normal. The lights were on, the counters were clean, but the air felt heavy, like something was watching me. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft and rough, right in my ear. It seemed to come from everywhere. I spun around, but no one was there. The whisper got louder, more urgent. I finally understood the words, "Get out while you still can." I grabbed my phone and ran to the front door, but it was locked. I couldn't get it open. The whispering got meaner, louder. I panicked. I ran back to the living room, grabbed a vase to protect myself, and stood there frozen. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. They were slow, heavy, and getting closer. I held the vase up, ready to swing. Then I saw her, a tall, thin woman with long silver hair and pale eyes. She wore a long white gown and moved slowly toward me. I asked, "Who are you?" trying to sound brave. She didn't answer. She reached out with a bony hand and touched my face. Right then, a shock went through me, and suddenly I saw visions. I was overwhelmed by the visions. I saw a family filled with joy, laughing together, but then I saw something terrible, a tragedy that tore them apart. It was a loss so deep it seemed to change everything. I saw the same woman, standing right where she was now, her eyes filled with sadness and pain. As the visions faded away, I understood the truth. She wasn't just a ghost, she was a spirit trapped in our house for many years. I knew I had to help her find peace. Suddenly, I felt braver. I reached out and took her hand, and together we walked through the house. Room by room, we uncovered memories and secrets that had been hidden for a long time. When we finally reached the front door, I knew it was time. I opened the door and she slowly faded into the night. Her face looked calm, finally at peace. As I stood there, a deep sense of relief came over me. I would never forget what happened that night. I had faced my fears and helped a lost soul find peace, and for that, I would always feel thankful. A few years ago, my life changed in a way I never expected. It started when I decided to live alone in our big family house. My parents and I had been having arguments, and I wanted to show them I could live by myself. I was young, excited, and full of hope for my independence. The house was old with creaky floors and drafty hallways, but I loved it. It felt like my safe place, a quiet space away from everything. Living alone wasn't easy at first. Some nights were really scary. The silence echoed through the house and made me feel alone. But I kept going, trying to prove to myself and my parents that I could handle it. One night I was reading in bed when I heard a strange noise coming from the basement. At first I thought it was just the house settling, or maybe an animal outside. But the noise got louder, clearer, and it gave me chills. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking downstairs. The basement was dark and cold, and each step creaked under my feet. My heart was pounding. I moved the flashlight around, shining it on the dusty corners and shelves covered in cobwebs. But everything seemed normal. Just as I was about to go back upstairs, I heard a quiet whimper from behind a stack of boxes. I froze, my pulse racing. I slowly moved closer, the light from my flashlight shaking as my hand trembled. That's when I saw him, a man crouched in the corner. He looked terrified, staring at me. My thoughts raced. Who was he? How did he get inside? Why was he hiding in my basement? Before I could react, the man spoke in a shaky voice. He told me he was homeless and had found his way inside, just looking for a place to stay warm. He begged me not to call the police and promised he would leave right away. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to call for help, but another part of me felt sorry for him. In the end, I chose kindness. I helped him up and led him out of the basement, watching him disappear into the night. I promised I wouldn't tell anyone, but over the next few days I felt uneasy. What if he came back? What if he had lied? I tried to shake off the fear, reminding myself that I did the right thing. But one night, as I was trying to sleep, I heard the same noise again. This time it was louder, and I could hear footsteps too. I was terrified. I grabbed my flashlight and carefully made my way down the stairs again. When I reached the basement, I saw him, the same man. He was standing in the middle of the room, and there was something wild in his eyes. Before I could move, he came toward me fast. I screamed and backed up, trying to find something to protect myself. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a baseball bat leaning against the wall. I grabbed it and turned to face him, but he was gone, just vanished, like he had never been there. I stood there shaking, confused and afraid. I thought about calling the police, but I wasn't sure they'd believe me. It all sounded too strange. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was fear messing with my head. But deep down, I knew the truth. Someone had been in my house, and they were watching me. Weeks went by, but I never felt safe again. Every sound made me jump. I tried telling myself I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the fear. Then one day, while cleaning the basement, I found it, a makeshift bed hidden behind the boxes. There were food wrappers and clothes too. Someone had been living there. My stomach dropped. How long had he been there? What did he want? And where was he now? I wanted to run away from the house and never come back, but I knew I had to deal with this. I finally called the police and told them everything. I told them about the man, the noises, and all the fear I had lived with. The officers arrived quickly. They took my story seriously and searched every inch of the house. At first, they didn't find anything. I started to feel hopeless again. But then one of the officers spoke with a neighbor who had seen someone suspicious hanging around. They found him and questioned him. He admitted everything. He had been living in my basement for weeks, secretly watching me as I lived my life. He claimed he didn't mean any harm, just wanted shelter and food. But I knew better. As they took him away in handcuffs, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The nightmare was over. I could finally live in peace, without fear. This happened to me last summer when I was home from college and staying at my parents' house for the holidays. I was looking forward to some quiet time. Their house is in a peaceful neighborhood surrounded by tall trees that make the nights feel even darker. It's cozy, but when you're alone at night, it can get a little creepy. One night around 3 a.m., I was lying in bed wide awake, scrolling through my phone. Suddenly my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw my sister's name. That was strange. Her room was just down the hall, and if she needed something, she could have come straight to me. Still, I answered the call, but as soon as I said hello, the call ended. I figured she must have pressed it by mistake. So I got out of bed and walked down the hallway to check on her. But before I reached her room, I heard her scream. A loud, terrified scream. I rushed inside. She was sitting up in bed, pale, eyes wide in fear. I asked her what happened. She pointed to the corner of her room, her hands shaking. I looked but saw nothing. Through tears, she said she had woken up and seen a shadowy figure inches from her face. It was tall, dark, and made her feel like she couldn't breathe. I tried to calm her down, telling her maybe it was just a nightmare. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said she had called me for help. I reminded her that her phone was downstairs in her purse. She looked confused. We checked. Her phone was still in her bag, but I checked mine, and sure enough, there was a call log showing she had called me. But her phone had no record of it. It was like the call never happened. That's when things started to feel really strange. We were both scared and confused. We decided to go downstairs to calm down. As we sat in the kitchen, I couldn't stop feeling like something was wrong. The house was quiet, but I kept hearing little sounds. Creaks, soft thumps, like someone was moving upstairs. I told myself it was just the old house settling, but I wasn't sure anymore. We stayed up for hours, talking and trying to understand what had happened, but nothing made sense. It felt like there were missing pieces we couldn't find. Eventually, we went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shadow my sister saw and the mysterious phone call. I started to feel like we weren't alone, like something was watching us, something waiting. The next day, we told our parents what had happened. They just brushed it off, saying it was probably a prank call or just a bad dream. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what my sister experienced. It was real and it was terrifying. After that night, I started noticing strange things happening around the house. Doors would slam shut by themselves, and I'd hear footsteps in the hallway late at night. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, or maybe my imagination, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. It started to feel like I was living inside a horror movie, and I couldn't find a way out. It was like being stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. One night, I decided to search the house. I grabbed a flashlight and went from room to room, checking every closet and every corner. I didn't find anything unusual, but just as I was about to give up, I heard a whisper. It was soft and raspy and seemed to come from every direction. "Get out while you still can," it said. I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. The voice seemed to come from the walls themselves. It sent a deep chill down my spine. I knew then I couldn't stay any longer. I ran back to my room, grabbed my bag, and started packing. My sister saw me and asked what I was doing. I told her we had to leave right away. She looked scared but didn't ask any more questions. We packed fast, left the house, and never looked back. We never returned to that house again, and we never talked about what happened that summer. But I'll never forget how scared I was and the feeling I had that something in that house wanted us gone. My name is Alex. I'm 22 years old, and I live alone in a small, quiet house on the edge of town. It's a peaceful place, especially at night, when the only sounds are the wind blowing through the trees and the hoot of an owl now and then. Normally, I enjoy the peace, but tonight feels different. It's one of those moonless nights when the darkness feels extra heavy, like it's swallowing everything. I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by shadows with only a small lamp turned on. The ticking clock seemed louder than usual, and I couldn't shake a strange, uneasy feeling. I had planned to relax, just a quiet night in with a couple of movies. But the longer I sat there, the more it felt like someone was watching me. Every little creak from the house made me jump. I kept looking over my shoulder, sure I'd see someone or something in the dark. I tried to ignore the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination. But then I heard a soft scratching sound from somewhere in the house. My heart skipped a beat as I listened closely, but the sound stopped, leaving me wondering if I imagined it. I tried to focus on the movie again, but my thoughts kept going back to that noise. Maybe it's a mouse, I told myself, trying to explain it away, but I couldn't convince myself. Something felt wrong about tonight. I reached for the remote with a shaky hand, ready to turn everything off and go to bed. But then I heard it again. The scratching sound, louder and more desperate this time. It was coming from upstairs, from my bedroom. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. A cold sweat formed on my skin. I wanted to believe I was just imagining things, but I knew I wasn't. I gathered all the courage I had and slowly walked up the stairs. Each step felt like it took forever. The scratching got louder with each step, like it was right next to me. When I reached the top, I stopped and listened. The sound was coming from behind my bedroom door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. My heart was racing. I took a deep breath and opened the door, bracing myself for something terrible. But the room was empty. It was dark, with just a little light from the moon coming through the window. I stepped inside, telling myself I had been overreacting. But then I saw it, the scratch. A long, deep line on the wall, like someone had dragged their nails across it. My blood went cold. I wasn't alone. Something was here with me. Something dark and evil hiding in the shadows. Suddenly, the idea of staying in the house another minute made me feel sick. I turned to run, to get out as fast as I could. But just as I moved, I heard laughter. Low, creepy laughter that filled the room. I stopped, frozen in fear, as the laughter got louder. Then out of the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was a horrible creature with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. I screamed, the sound echoing through the empty house, as the thing lunged at me. Then everything went black. When I woke up, the sun was coming through the curtains. For a moment, I thought maybe it was all a nightmare. But then I looked at the wall and saw the long scratch. It was real. I ran from the house and never went back. Even now, I feel like something is watching me, waiting for night to fall again. It was a stormy night, the kind where the wind howls like a wounded animal, and the rain hits the windows like sharp knives. Lightning flashed across the sky, casting strange shadows on the walls. In the middle of all this, I was home alone with my little brother, Tim. Our parents had left earlier for a week-long trip, leaving me in charge. I wasn't too excited about watching over my 8-year-old brother, especially on a night like this. But we had food, emergency numbers, and plenty of instructions from Mom and Dad. Everything was supposed to be fine. As the storm got worse, we sat on the couch and tried to distract ourselves with a movie. But the thunder and lightning made it hard to concentrate. I couldn't shake a strange feeling growing inside me. By midnight, Tim had fallen asleep beside me, curled up for warmth. I stayed awake, staring at the lightning flashing through the windows. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and move. Then I saw something that made my heart stop. A tall figure standing outside the window. I held my breath, hoping it was just a trick of the light, but the figure didn't go away. It stood there perfectly still, watching me. I wanted to wake Tim and tell him, but I couldn't move. I watched in horror as the figure slowly stepped closer to the glass. A flash of lightning lit up his face for just a second. It was pale and twisted, with a cruel smile. Then he tapped on the window. The sound echoed through the room. I felt sick. Tim stirred beside me, but I didn't move. I just stared at the window, hoping it would all stop. Then the figure tapped again, harder this time. Suddenly, he tried to open the window. I jumped up, panic taking over. The window creaked as it opened, and the figure climbed inside. I backed away, my heart pounding. He stood up straight. He was huge, his face hidden by shadows. The smell coming from him was awful, like something dead. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He took a step toward me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I was frozen. Then just like that, he vanished. I stood there shaking. Had it all been a dream? A trick of the storm? But the open window told me it was real. He had been here. I grabbed Tim and ran. We ran into the storm, not looking back. The wind and rain hit us from all sides, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I don't know where he went. I don't know if he's still out there. But I do know this. I will never forget the night the tall man came to our house and the fear he left behind. The worst thing that ever happened to me was back in 1996. I was a truck driver, working with another driver. We had picked up a load and checked our weight. I took the first shift, driving through heavy rain from Detroit to just before St. Louis. We stopped at a rest area, updated our logbooks, and switched drivers. I was exhausted after 10 hours in the rain. Before we switched, the other driver, let's call him John, joked, "If we die tonight, I'll come back and haunt you." He laughed, zipped up the curtain, and went to sleep. After I got into the sleeper, I put on a movie, My Cousin Vinny, and tried to fall asleep. I often wondered what I'd do if we went off a cliff. I figured the best thing would be to hit the floor and pray. About 45 minutes later, I heard John shout, "Screw it! Hang on." I could feel the truck weaving. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it wasn't right. I hit the floor, praying hard. The curtain was still zipped, so I couldn't see anything. Then I felt the truck shake. There was a hard impact, but the truck didn't stop moving. We were fully loaded at 80,000 pounds. I'll never forget the sound and the feeling. We had hit something but didn't lose speed. We'd skidded, gone airborne, and ended up in the other lane of traffic, west of St. Louis on the I-44. We hit a white pickup truck head on. Our truck flipped and ended up facing the wrong way. Everything went quiet. I was in shock. John asked if I was okay. I said yes and told him, "Let's get out of here. I smell smoke." I had been on the floor, so now the roof was like a door. I crawled out, and John followed. I was standing in my socks on the wet road, soaked in diesel fuel and rain. Smoke was rising from the hood. I was too stunned to understand what had happened. I saw people running to the white truck with fire extinguishers. It felt like a dream. I looked down and saw blood on my hand and coming from my mouth. Someone was talking to a person inside the pickup. I saw their lips say, "I know," as if trying to comfort them. The next thing I remember, John and I were in an ambulance, heading to the hospital. As we pulled away, I cried. I kept thinking about how scared those people in the pickup must have been. I left out the worst details, things nobody should have to see or even imagine. Later, I learned all three in the truck, a man, his wife, and their little daughter, didn't survive. The guilt hit me hard. Why did I live when they didn't? I'll never forget the smell of that morning, standing in fuel and smoke. That stretch of road was called Blood Alley because of how many wrecks had happened there. Later, I drove through the same spot and saw they had finally repaired it. I wish it had been done sooner. Talking about this after all these years is hard, but it's a reminder. Driving deserves your full attention. Don't text. Don't get distracted. Even short trips can change your life forever.